Mississippi.
Mr. President, I once again come to the floor to talk about a Feinstein-Wicker amendment to this transportation bill, which I hope we can have a vote on and dispose of and let the Senate work their will on, either tonight, late, or perhaps tomorrow after the pending business is taken care of. And I would begin, Mr. President, by quoting from an editorial yesterday in the Post-Gazette, the daily newspaper in Pittsburgh, where it says, the tractor trailer roaring by you on the highway could be 9 feet longer next year. It could be this long. And it could be mandated by this Congress on 39 states that don't want it. The editorial goes on to point out that there is legislation pending that would force these longer trucks on these 39 states, on all 50 states. 11 of them already allow it, but 39 don't. And unless we act and adopt the Feinstein-Wicker amendment on this bill, a provision in the Transportation Appropriation Bill will go forward and is likely to be signed into law requiring this. This will have been done, I might add, Mr. President, without a full debate, without a hearing being held in any committee of the United States Senate on this issue. So what are we talking about? I have here a poster where it says, would you feel safe driving next to a double 33? This is the size of the proposed new longer trucks that we would mandate on all 50 states. And as you can see, Mr. President, here's the size of a typical passenger car. Here's the comparative size of a motorcycle, a bicycle, and of course there's a defenseless pedestrian. Compared to the pedestrian down to the passenger car, this federal mandate that I'm trying to at least give a timeout to would mandate on states that they allow these twin 33 trailers, and they would be driving along next to this car that my kids are going to be driving in, my grandchildren are going to be riding in. I don't think it's a good idea, but I would point out that if a state does think it's a good idea, I'm not going to stand in their way. Seems that some 11 states have decided they're willing to take this risk, many of them out in the wide open spaces of the West. But it's worth saying that these 39 states don't allow longer tandem trucks, and we should ask ourselves whether Congress knows better than these states. These states don't allow them. Alabama, Alaska, Arkansas, California, Colorado, Connecticut, Delaware, Georgia, Hawaii, Illinois. As a matter of fact, we have a unanimous resolution from the Illinois State Senate, a bipartisan, unanimous resolution from the Illinois State Senate saying don't mandate these double 33s on us. I go on. Kansas, Kentucky, Louisiana, Maine, Maryland, Michigan, Minnesota, my home state of Mississippi, Missouri, Nebraska, New Hampshire, New Jersey, New Mexico, New York, North Carolina, North Dakota, Ohio, Oklahoma, Pennsylvania, Rhode Island, South Carolina, South Dakota, Tennessee, Texas, Vermont, Virginia, Washington, West Virginia, and Wisconsin, Mr. President. None of those states allow twin 33s now, but there is a proposal that I'm trying to stop that would mandate that these states must allow for the longer and I believe more dangerous trucks. The editorial goes on to quote the former head of the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, who likened massive trucks to trains on highways that would damage roads and endanger motorists. You know, I think it makes a lot of sense. I think it would damage roads. I think it would endanger motorists. Now, if my state of Mississippi, with a considered judgment of the Mississippi Department of Transportation and their commission, the Mississippi Sheriff's Association, the Mississippi Association of Chiefs of Police, if all of those people are advising us against this, why should we, as a Congress, tell these states that we know better than they do? And I'll just quote one final statement from the editorial before I ask that it be admitted into the record. The editorial concludes, with its bridges already in the worst shape in the nation, Pennsylvania doesn't need longer trucks on its roads. Now, I ask at this point that this editorial be entered into the record, Mr. President.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. President. And once again, I stress the point, this is Pennsylvania specific. Pennsylvania has made a considered decision not to allow these. I think it ill behooves us as a Congress to say we know better about the roads and the condition of the bridges in the state of Pennsylvania than the local authorities do. So in the interest of deferring to the states, I think we should pass the Feinstein-Wicker Amendment not to mandate these longer trucks on states that don't want them. Also, I do want to stress a few things. If this goes forward, it will have been done with no hearings in this Congress in any committee. The Appropriations Committee, which voted on this, didn't have a hearing. The Transportation Committee, which I serve on, didn't have a hearing. The Commerce Committee, which is another committee of jurisdiction on this matter, never had a hearing about this. Wouldn't it be a good idea, before we tell states they've got to do this, wouldn't it be a good idea to get proponents of this federal mandate before us to answer questions about it? Perhaps opponents of this federal mandate to come and give us their considered opinion. Experts about the safety issues, experts about what this will do to bridges, about what it will do to tear up our highways. Wouldn't that be a good idea, before we decide in our wisdom here inside the Beltway in Washington, D.C., that we know better than 39 states? I think it would be a good idea. We might want to hear from AAA. We might want to hear from officials of the state of Missouri who have memorialized this Congress not to mandate this on the very people that they are trying to represent on a state-by-state basis. I'd like to get the Mississippi Trucking Association here. They've come out against this federal mandate. They're in favor of the Feinstein-Wicker Amendment to continue to leave this up to the states. I'd like to get them before a hearing and hear them out, and perhaps members of the Congress and members of the various committees could be convinced, as I have become convinced, that they're correct. Why would any trucker be opposed to this, Mr. President? And I would simply tell you, a lot of truckers are small business people. We honor small business people. We know that they're the engine of job creation in the United States of America. Many of the small truckers have told me, and they make up organizations like the Mississippi Trucking Association. They've told me they can't compete in an environment in which this becomes the norm. The big guys can easily move to the tandem 33 trailers, but the small people can't. It's much harder for them to get a loan. It's much harder for them to come up with the capital expenditure of moving to this, and many of them feel like they will be put out of business. So I think we should be very careful, Mr. President, about saying we're going to run over the considered opinion of people in 39 states. We're going to disregard the Mississippi Chiefs of Police Association and a host of other state chiefs of police associations. We're going to disregard the Mississippi Sheriff's Association and a laundry list of other sheriff's associations from all around the United States of America. I think The better approach is the Feinstein approach, which lost on a tie vote in the Appropriations Committee. The Feinstein approach says, let's make sure we have a full and comprehensive study about this and get back to us, and if we implement it, let's do it in the normal course of events with a rulemaking process and comments on all sides. So all this Feinstein-Wicker Amendment does is say we can't mandate this year. Instead, we're going to ask the leading experts in this city to come back to us and tell us if, in their opinion, this is safe. Tell us, in their opinion, what this will do to bridges and infrastructure. And I think that is the better approach. You know, there were 30 members of the Appropriation Committee, Mr. President, that voted on this issue. The Feinstein, actually fewer than 30. The Feinstein, exactly 30. Let me make sure I'm precise here. The Feinstein amendment lost on a vote of 15 to 15. Now, should that go forward as the policy of this United States Senate? I really don't think so. I think we owe it to the American people on an issue that involves safety, on an issue that involves infrastructure, and on an issue that involves deferring to the states to make the best decisions for their people. I think we owe it to them to have a full vote and not let something go forward on a virtual tie vote. The provision that is now in the appropriation bill was adopted 16 to 14 in the Appropriations Committee with no hearings. And I simply ask my colleagues, is that the way to make a major safety decision, an infrastructure decision for the American people? So we're nearing the time when supporters of the Feinstein-Wicker Amendment are hoping for a vote. And I was heartened to hear the conversation of the majority leader yesterday that he certainly hoped we would be able to have votes on germane votes like this. I appreciate the efforts of the ranking member of the committee, a friend of mine from California, and in saying that she is going to do whatever she can to get us a vote on this. And so I do appreciate this. I would say to members listening today, Mr. President, it's time to get informed on this issue. It's time to find out what the facts are, to realize that this appropriations decision that I'm trying to reverse and put the brakes on to a certain extent is not permissive in nature. It is a requirement. If it goes through, we will be telling 39 states that they're wrong. Somehow we're right here in Washington, D.C. And so I would hope we, first of all, can get an amendment, have it brought to the floor, and then I would hope members would search their consciences and decide that indeed this is something that at least ought to be studied thoroughly. We ought to have all the facts. And further than that this is something where we don't need to run over 39 states who happen to feel otherwise.